So welcome, Nate, to the Happier at Work podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself to listeners?
Absolutely, Aoife. It's great to meet you. Great to be here. My name is Nate Regier, and I'm the CEO of Next Element Consulting. We're a global leadership development firm, and our mission is to bring more compassion to every workplace. And we do this through amplifying the message of compassion through relationships like ours. We do this through developing tools and leadership training tools for people to become more compassionate. And we also love to train and certify and support a global network of coaches and trainers and consultants that are also using our tools. So that's my day job. And I also have a family, and I just, my oldest daughter just got married a week and a half ago, and I
Oh,
can't stop
wow.
talking about that. So that's who I am
That's
today.
time to celebrate, big
Yes.
celebration, especially in this current climate, shall we say.
Well, it wasn't easy
Fantastic.
to do it, but we
Yeah,
managed to
so,
do it, and
so
nobody
brilliant.
got sick. And
Yes,
yeah,
amazing. Now, I'd love to drill in a little bit to what you're talking about in relation to compassion. So I did see a video not too long ago which talked about compassion and the difference between, say, compassion and empathy. So would you like to explain a little bit more detail what you mean when you talk about compassion?
yeah. Well, compassion has been important for our company from the beginning, and it's not often well understood. A lot of people think that compassion means kind of this selfless giving of everything. Our heart goes out to people, and it's driven by empathy. And it's certainly easy to think that that's all that compassion is when we look at some of the magnanimous role models like Mother Teresa or Gandhi. Give, 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 never think of yourself. And compassion is really much more than that, because it comes from the Latin root meaning to struggle with or to suffer with, not instead of. It means to get alongside people. And so for leadership, this is a powerful concept that compassion means that we are struggling with people towards shared goals, towards our mission, towards our vision. And that requires a very expanded mindset for how we approach that.
Brilliant. And I've never heard it explained that way before, but I really, really like that approach. It's really great.
Thank you.
So we're here to talk about your book, and I had a look on your website earlier, and it looks so interesting. It's just a really unique approach, I think. Would you like to explain a little bit more about where the book came from, the idea for the book, and what's in it?
Sure,
I haven't read it yet,
sure.
so what's in it?
Yeah. Well, the title is very much the story of the genesis of this book, seeing people through. And like I said, our company specializes in leadership training, particularly around communication and around diversity and personalities and how people appreciate and leverage that diversity. One of my colleagues and co-founders of our company was in Michigan doing 2 weeks of intensive training with a school system. And it was day after day working with different groups doing the same thing over and over and over. And she was worn out by the end of the week. And one of the things that happens when people are learning about personality or models of individual differences is it's really easy to start to hang on to labels and start putting people in boxes and oversimplifying and kind of stereotyping, like, you're an eagle, or you're a red, or you're this quadrant, or you're an M, an ENTJ or whatever.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that can become that's really hard when we're trying to promote inclusion and diversity. So she was tired at the end of the week. She was going to spend the weekend in a hotel and not see her family. She went out for Chinese food. And when she received her bill, she got the usual fortune cookie. And when she opened the fortune cookie, inside what it read was, the intention is not to see through people. The intention is to see people through. And in that moment, she realized, this is why I'm here. This is what we do. We are working with a framework that helps see people through, not just figure people out so you can label them and identify them like there's some kind of a puzzle or a lock to be unlocked. And when she came back and shared that with us, we knew on that day, almost 10 years ago, that that was going to be the title of this book. And so we spent all this time working on, what does leadership look like when you really commit to seeing people through?
Brilliant. It's a fantastic backstory.
Yeah.
Really, really interesting. And so talk me through what's the kind of steps in the
Yeah.
book.
Yeah. Well, the subtitle is Unleash Your Leadership Potential with the Proper Communication Model. The process communication model is a behavioral model of personality, specifically focusing on observable communication behaviors. And we like it because it's so unique compared to other models because it focuses on observable behavior. It focuses on what we call types in people instead of types of people. So what that means is the identified personality types that we talk about in the book, we all have all of them in us in a preferred set order to some degree. So what that means is that for me, Aoife, to connect with you, I have to find that part inside of me first. And then when I appreciate that and I honor that, then I can do the same for you. And so this is such a powerful framework for unlocking leadership that we decided to write a book where we taught really important leadership principles with the framework of PCM, process communication model, so people can really learn about what it means to grow into my personality and then help others do the same.
No, it's brilliant. And I don't think I've heard that approach before. Typically, like you say, we get labeled, we get put into boxes, and I'm guilty of that myself. And I love doing that, and I love
Mm-hmm.
solving puzzles and everything that you said, you know, and working out, well, if I'm this personality type, who will I get on most with, and use that kind of information in order to determine who would be best working together, and those kind of things. Like, that's something that I find really interesting. So
Yeah.
this, to me, is, it kind of flips that on its head and said, well, actually, if you can use this model to really drill in and understand yourself even more, and really get in touch with who you are, and like you say, grow into your personality. You don't need to change who you are. You just grow into who you
Yeah.
already are,
Yeah.
and be more of yourself, which I think is what people want. And there's a lot of talk about authenticity and
Yes.
vulnerability. So, you know, those kind of things are really key for it. Um, so I really, really like that as an approach, you know, over and above what is typically done. So
Yeah.
what kind of, I suppose, where do we start? So I had
Yeah.
a look on the website, as I said,
Uh-huh.
and it said that the tool to measure your personality is only available to people resident of the United States, which I am not.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah.
wasn't able to take it. But I suppose for people listening in the States, they'll be able to take that, and they'll be able to start kind of the
Yeah.
process. But I suppose, you know, for someone like me, how do I
Yeah.
start
Yeah.
to unravel?
Well, two great things. I want to answer that question, and I want to go back to what you said about how this book turns the paradigm on its head.
Yes.
And that is critical because once we turn the paradigm upside down, it allows us to start talking about important leadership concepts with a new view, like authenticity. What does it mean to be authentic when we used to say it means being true to myself? Well, if I have all 6 personality types within me, what does it mean to be true to myself? And
Mm.
how does that allow me to be agile and honor other people at the same time? So we tackle tough topics like hypocrisy, honesty, influence, self-deception, trust, and talk about those with this kind of upside down framework. Um, to your other point, actually, the good news is there is a new leadership profile that is only available in the US now, but it will be available globally soon. The good news, though, is that this model is being taught by over 3,000 trainers and coaches globally in many, many countries. So the profile itself and all kinds of great insights are available in any country you live in. And anyone can go look for a trainer or a coach near them and obtain their own personality structure profile and use that along with my book to be able to gain great insights into their own leadership.
Just when you hear me being quiet, that's me taking notes.
No problem. Yeah. If you went to our website, we are having to be very careful right now with the particular leadership profile because it's new and
Right.
it's just available in the US now, but it's coming.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, no, I look forward to that, because I suppose I'm the kind of person, I like to understand more about
Mhm.
myself. I think for leadership, for me, self-awareness is one of the critical skill, or one of the
Yeah.
critical things. You know, it's not
Yeah.
really a skill that you have. I'm not sure you would necessarily call it a skill. But it's one of the critical elements of being an
Yeah.
effective leader, is seeking out information about yourself.
Yeah.
And I suppose not only that, but taking on board feedback and acting upon it, not just not just
Yes.
seeking out the information, but actually taking action about it.
Yes.
Because we often say, like, don't worry about what other people think. But I read a really interesting book a few months back, and it said, well, you do need to worry about what other people think, because actually other people are the ones who are buying from you. They're the ones that are hiring you. They're the ones that are
Yeah.
collaborating with you. And it is important. And if
Yeah.
you're getting that feedback multiple times, that maybe the problem is with you and it's not with
Well,
other people.
the main character in the book, Kayla, this is a fable, and it was,
Yeah.
I've always been inspired. One of my favorite fables is the book Leadership and Self-Deception by the Arbinger Institute. And what I loved about this fable was the main character is on a journey, and this main character gets paired up with a guide who teaches them. But many, many times throughout the journey, the main character thinks they have it all figured out, and then the onion gets
Like
peeled
us.
back. Yeah, one more layer. And so Kayla in this journey, she is just like that. And she's learning about her own personality, her own leadership. And she comes up against these barriers inside of herself, her preconceived notions, her past experience, her own personality,
Mm.
and she breaks through, and then she thinks she has it figured out, and then she stumbles, and her guide and her mentor just keeps gently um, helping her appreciate who she is deeper and deeper and deeper, to your point that it starts here and it starts within us first.
Mm. Yeah, no, really interesting. And I did see that on the website, that it's told as a fable. So that in itself, I think, would be very interesting. Now, on some of the previous podcasts, we talked about leadership, and there was a whole series on leadership, actually. And, some of the interesting things to come up and to come out of that were, can everyone be a leader? And, are some people, it's not even just the kind of born versus the made leaders. It's more, some people don't want to be leaders, but that's the path that's presented to them within their career. And like they
Yeah.
see that as, this is the only way for me to progress. What are your thoughts around that?
I agree with you.
Mm.
And our definition of leadership is leveraging diversity towards shared goals. And that's a pretty broad definition, but in the context of this book, it's about how do we leverage the diversity of personality within us and around us towards a common goal, whether that's our strategic initiatives, our company's mission, our family, whatever that is. And so I think that anyone can be a leader. A parent is leading their 3 different children with different personalities to get in the car and arrive at school on time. So mothers and fathers and teachers are leading diverse groups of personalities every single day towards a shared common goal, which is to education and learning and growth. So yes, anyone can be a leader, regardless of their position, as long as they care about influencing diversity and honoring diversity towards a shared goal.
And I suppose the question then is, what if they don't, or what if they're not aware, or what if they're not promoting diversity of opinion and
Yeah.
different approaches to things?
Yeah, and that's one of the challenges that the main character has, is she learns along the way that sometimes not everybody sees the world like I do.
Mm.
And that is the first big kind of scale to take off of her eyes, is to realize that other people experience the world differently than me, and if I assume that they don't, then I'd have no idea how I'm coming across. I have no idea how my behavior is affecting them or how they're experiencing me. So yes, I do care about how other people experience me. And the other big lesson in the book too is that ultimately we cannot control other people or control other people's feelings. We can influence, we can invite, and we can take care of ourselves and take responsibility for our own thoughts and feelings and behaviors. But there's a limit to what we can do. And when we know where that limit is, I think we can be way more effective.
Brilliant. So again, it comes back to understanding
It
ourselves and,
does.
our personality, but our limits, our limitations
Yeah.
within there. That could be including boundaries and that sort of
Yeah.
thing, which is really interesting. So when you talk about things like diversity and promoting diversity, do you want to talk to me a little bit more about, well, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was thinking back the other day. The first time I ever talked about personality diversity publicly was in 2013. I was a presenter at a Human Resource National Convention in the US here for all human resource people. And it was a particular convention focused on diversity and inclusion. And so I was speaking on this topic. The room was packed, and I was so excited. The room was packed. But afterwards, people came out to me and said, I had never heard about personality diversity. I care about diversity and inclusion, but I didn't know that this was an aspect of it. And I'm blown away to find out how much diversity that we take for granted is actually personality functioning beneath the surface.
Mm.
And so since then, I've really been beating that drum of personality is an important aspect of diversity that we need to pay attention to, because it influences how we experience the world, how we interpret each other's behavior, how we talk, how we're motivated, what we are afraid of, what keeps us up at night, what helps us sleep at night. All of that is influenced by personality. So we better be talking about it just like we're talking about gender and ethnicity and background and race and everything else.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I think you're absolutely right. And I don't think people are talking about that. They're talking about the obvious
Yeah,
physical differences between
yeah,
people, and they call that diversity.
yeah.
But really, ultimately, and there's so many studies on this as well, showing how having diversity, especially at those senior leader roles, is really critical for business
Hmm.
success,
Yeah,
and it really
yeah,
drives growth. But to me, it's about that diversity of thought. So finding
hmm,
people who think differently to
yeah,
you,
yeah,
and probably at the heart of that is more
yeah,
personality. So having
yeah,
those diverse opinions and those diverse perspectives, because people are built differently.
yeah. Well, I've when people read the book or get training in PCM or receive their own profile, one of the things they'll start noticing is that we tend to gravitate towards people that have similar personality energies as us. So we walk into a room of strangers or into a networking event or a cocktail reception or a bar, and over time we feel more comfortable with people who speak our language and get us. And so we gravitate towards them. We naturally trust them more. We naturally think they understand us more, and we tend to open up more to them. That same workshop that I just described in 2013, after the workshop, a man came out to me, African American gentleman. He said, I'm the head of diversity and inclusion for my company. And he said, you get me. Finally, you get me. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, clearly you've been around lots of African Americans. You just understand us. And I said, man, I wish that was true. I grew up in Africa. Yeah, but that's not the same. I said, I don't have a lot of Black friends. I said, I wish that was true, but what do you mean? He says, the way you talked. And what happened was when I role played a particular personality type called the rebel, I showed what's called verve. And verve is a word to describe kind of often used to describe kind of African American style, a little bit more expressive. And that immediately he invited him to think that I got him and he trusted me.
Wow. Okay.
And there's research to show actually that personality type is slightly more prevalent among African Americans. So now we instantly have a race, ethnic, cultural personality, mix
Yeah.
that we have to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but the beauty was, by speaking his language, I earned his trust, and I didn't have to have lots of experience in his world or know everything about African American culture or have been through the suffering that he's been through. Simply have to speak his language.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting, and something that occurred to me. So I've just finished a dissertation for my master's in organizational behavior, and
Congratulations.
thank you.
Wow. It's a big deal.
Yeah, no, it really is. I submitted my dissertation last month, but it was a topic, I guess I was looking at it for about a year and a half. Something that I
Hmm.
still find hugely interesting was fit and fitting in at work. And I think
Yeah.
exactly what we're
Yeah.
talking about now is a different element of that, which is why it's so interesting to me. But one of, I suppose, the key elements within what I was looking at were values congruence and need
Yeah.
satisfaction.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't look at personality as such, but one of the kind of core principles, I suppose, around that was like attracts like. And we tend to be attracted to organizations that we perceive to be like ourselves.
Yeah.
And if we're
Yeah.
a hiring manager, or if we are a recruiter or if we're in HR, we will hire people
Yeah.
who we
Yeah. Yeah.
think they get me or I get them
Yeah.
or whatever. Like attracts like. But it also occurred to me as you were speaking that if you gravitate towards people who are like you, then you create this, what they call the echo chamber, where you're just getting reflected back the opinions that you have anyway. And that's the opposite of
Yeah.
diversity. So any kind of thoughts on how to, I mean, it's a natural human instinct. So how
Yeah.
do we branch out of that to get exposure
Oh,
to the different types of opinions or the different types of personalities that don't necessarily
well,
feel comfortable to us?
the work you're doing is so important with your dissertation, and what we've found with the process communication model helps us understand the difference between values as belief systems or principles
Mm,
and values in terms of what's important to us, and it distinguishes that from need satisfaction. So
great.
each personality type has certain needs that are very important to be satisfied in order to function well. That's what they value.
Mm,
Only one personality type actually aspires to principles and values as a belief system, and they have opinions about that, and that represents only 10% of the population. So it helps us really get clarity around what you're talking about there and be able to speak to the things people value,
yeah.
which is different than speaking to values
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
as principles. But the what what this framework and what my book helps people do is realize that that yes, like attracts like, but if we're not careful, we do get to an echo chamber. I don't know how many times we've been brought into companies because they want us to help them with diversity or more creativity, and we found out that the CEO hired everyone that is just like him. So it's not going to
Okay.
happen if you
Yeah.
just keep hiring people like you.
Yeah. And
But
you
then
hire
they
people
say,
who are yes men and
yeah,
they just say, yes, I agree with everything rather than challenging
or
you, what
they
you
just
think.
speak the same language, so you
Yeah.
always just come up with the same solution. So then they say, well, help us hire different people. And I say, I can do that, but if you don't know how to satisfy the different needs of those new
Mm,
people, they will burn out and leave within weeks.
yeah.
So you can't expect to have diversity unless you learn how to leverage that diversity, how to feed those needs, speak their language, leverage their unique gifts. So I think that's where we can take it to the next level is whatever framework or model you've learned about, ask the question, so what, now what? That's what we really need to be asking ourselves. And PCM answers those questions.
I love that. So what now? What? No, I love that. I mean, everything that you've said relates back to what I looked at in my dissertation. But
Mm,
like you say, it's kind of taken this to the next level now. Um, so I'd love to talk a little bit more about need satisfaction. And
sure.
so the research I did as part of my dissertation was it was focusing just on our basic psychological needs that
Hmm.
have shown to be universal, the needs
Right.
of autonomy, relatedness, and competence. But I'd
Hmm.
love to get a feel for any additional needs or any thoughts that you have on those basic psychological needs.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think there are kind of universal needs, and around kind of what you're talking about, there are personality specific needs, and they're called phase psychological needs because the word phase identifies which part of my personality right now is the one that fuels my engine, that fuels my tank. If I have all six in me, which one is the engine right now? And so they're not all equally relevant and important. So phase psychological needs, for example, one of the clusters of needs is recognition of productive work and time structure. And that's mine right now in my life. So for me, at the end of the day, the most important thing for me to be able to question to answer is, did I use my time productively? That's very different from, say, recognition of purposeful or principled work, which is, did I advance the cause and the values that I believe in today? Or recognition of person, did I connect meaningfully with relationships that affirm the value of human beings? Or contact, did I have playful, energizing, fun contact with people that just charged my battery? very different. So there's these different needs, and each personality structure has specific ones that have to get met in healthy ways, because if they don't, we'll try to get negative attention by meeting them in unhealthy, inappropriate ways. It's just human nature.
Yeah.
And that's where all the drama comes from.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
No, really interesting. I love, and the way you phrase those questions, it sounds almost like it's kind of an exercise to do, maybe as part of a ritual or a
Yeah.
journaling experience, or something that you can do, whether it's at the end of a day or
Yeah.
the end of a work week, or
Yeah.
however often you want to do it, just to reflect on and say, well, do I know A, what my needs are, and B, what
Yeah.
kind of questions can I ask of myself to
Yeah.
ensure that I am making sure that
Yeah.
my own needs are satisfied?
Absolutely. And that's one reason we're so excited about this new leadership profile, because that's what it does. It guides people through very specific self-reflection questions, checklists of behaviors to look at to know if I'm on track or if I'm getting off track, what I can do every day to stay healthy, how I enlist my support system to do that, how I hold myself accountable. And anyone who experiences PCM coaching or training will be able to do that. Um, but again, I think it's about the so what, now what? What's the point about learning about our personality if we don't put it into action to grow more fully
Mm,
into ourselves and to who we are?
yeah, it's that I've recently become aware of the knowing doing gap.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so like, to me, I mean, for years I thought, well, I'm reading all of these personal development books, of course,
Yeah.
I have everything together. uh, I don't need to do any work. I'm reading, I have all of this
Yeah.
knowledge, but
Yeah.
it made me realize that actually I hadn't applied any of the knowledge. I read and read and
Yeah.
read, and I knew, but I didn't necessarily apply it. I didn't necessarily
Yes.
take action, which is what's
Well,
kind
and
of crucial.
that knowing doing gap actually has 6 iterations depending on personality type.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
the thinker personality type has a struggle going from knowing to doing, because they believe they have to understand it perfectly before they can take action. So,
Just by
but
saying that, I'm like,
yeah,
yeah, I think I'm a thinker. I'm a
but
thinker.
the harmonizer personality type has the feeling asking gap. They have emotions and feelings that are important, but the gap is, will I ask for help? Will I ask for what I want? Will I tell anybody how I'm feeling? That's different. That's a knowing doing, but it's different. Um, or you talked about autonomy. One personality type, the imaginer, has a gap between they need solitude to recharge, but they need direction to activate. So it's the
Mm.
alone getting direction gap. How do I
Oh,
how do
yeah.
I close
Okay.
that gap? Because they're so different.
Yeah.
So each type has their own quote knowing doing gap. And
Yeah.
your question has inspired me to write a blog post about it. I think
Oh, brilliant.
I'm gonna reflect on that.
Yeah.
I like where you're going.
Amazing. Oh no, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Um, Now what did we talk about? There was one thing that I definitely wanted to pick up, and we touched on it before we started recording, Nate, and that was around, you mentioned on the website about your own personality, and you felt that
Mm.
you were maybe a bit of a rebel and you didn't quite fit in, and now you understand where all of that is stemming from. So would you
Yeah.
like to share a little bit more about what is that?
Yeah. Well, I'm a psychologist. My wife is a social worker, and we have a joke in these professions that we all go into this to fix ourselves, even though we act like we're fixing other people. But my personality base type is called promoter, and it's very charming, persuasive, adaptable. I love excitement. I like a lot of action or a lot of excitement in a short period of time. And that base type is shared by only 5% of the population. So growing up, nobody understood me. It was like, who is this alien living in our house? And none of my family members could help me. They thought I was weird and different. They didn't know how to motivate me. And so I kind of was just grabbing in the dark. And what it resulted was my tank was empty a lot of the time because I didn't know how to get my needs met. I didn't have mentors, guides. Despite my parents' best efforts, they didn't know how to teach me to do this. And so I just kind of accidentally figured it out. But what that meant is I was in distress a lot. And when I discovered PCM was when I finally understood what was going on and that there was nothing wrong with me. I was in distress and I didn't know how to get my needs met in a healthy way. And I mean, I don't know how many times I came close to death or burned bridges or caused drama or got expelled from school. I mean, it was just trouble. I don't know why I'm still alive. But once I figured that out, I committed my life to helping the next person like me not have to go through that and not have to expose the world to that distress. So
Yeah,
it's personal for me. It means a lot. And it really changed my life in a way that no other model of individual differences could.
yeah, yeah. And what is the background to the model? Like, has this been
Yeah.
around for quite some time? It's just I don't think
Yeah.
I've heard
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah, it's not as prevalent as some of the others that have massive marketing budgets behind them.
Mm,
Process communication model was developed in the 70s by Dr. Taby Kaler, a developmental psychologist. And what was unique, it was breakthrough at the time because it allowed us to observe second by second behavior that identified whether people were in a healthy communicating space or whether they were miscommunicating. And within a few years, it was picked up by NASA to select and train astronauts for the space shuttle program because it was so incredibly predictive and accurate. It's been used around the world. One of our past U.S. presidents personally studied under Dr. Taby Kaler to develop his communication skills. Pixar Animation Studios that makes movies like The Incredibles and all of those,
yeah.
all of those characters are based on the PCM personality types, and they
Oh
have
wow.
in-house trainers that use it. So it's all over the world.
Yeah,
Just I'm hoping this book and podcasts like this can raise the profile of it because
yeah.
it's so powerful and it's been
Well,
around
it's
for a long time.
yeah. I mean, it certainly piqued my interest, and I'd love to dive more into it because it does
Mm,
sound like it answers a lot of the questions that I feel were kind of unanswered still, I
yeah,
suppose. Like going back to what you were saying about the need satisfaction versus the values versus the
yeah,
beliefs. That's
yeah.
something like I did a coaching diploma a couple of years ago, and I came away from that going, but how do I understand what my beliefs
Right,
are? I
right.
wasn't really clear about how to understand where my beliefs are, where they come
Mm,
from, or how they show up. I've since learned a little bit more about that. But the idea of values, and like some people say that your values are inherent and that they stay with you for your entire life. But then other people say, no, your values can change over time. And
mm,
um, so really understanding the differences between, like you were saying, the values being, well, what do I value and what's important to me versus
yeah,
values being what is my belief system and what
right.
do I believe is right and what are the guidelines that I live my life by.
Yes,
And like
yes.
even that within itself just kind of blows that whole area wide open for discussion for me, and I suppose it explains a
Yeah,
lot of things that I didn't know just with
it
that one
does.
kind of
Yeah.
short exchange.
Well,
Um,
and the personality structure model shows how what's the difference between the two and how they change. Because what people value actually can change for
yeah,
about two-thirds of the
absolutely.
population. They experience a personality change. But what they believe in can also change based on life circumstances, education, family, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, really, really, really interesting.
Yeah. Thank
Now
you.
you mentioned, I made a note of three of the personality types. You mentioned that there were six in total.
Yeah.
So the ones I have are thinker, harmonizer, and promoter.
Yeah.
What are the other ones? Or do you want to talk to us a little bit about
Sure.
what each of them
Yeah.
mean?
The persister is the one that has belief systems, strong convictions about things. And that one is, we're really seeing it come alive right now during political times
Yeah,
because they believe in things and they can become very outspoken about that and very passionate about that. Um, the imaginer is what we might say is the most prototypical introvert of the group. The imaginer is much more prefers solitude, much more calm, much more. There's a lot of action inside, but we don't always see it.
mm,
And then the last one is the rebel. The rebel is the playful, fun one that is very creative and energetic and loves novel things, very spontaneous. And most four-factor models of personality don't distinguish the promoter from the rebel very well because they kind of both live large and live with their hearts on their sleeves.
mm,
And they don't distinguish the thinker and the persister because both look fairly studious, fairly academic, fairly in their heads, but they couldn't be more different on the inside.
yeah.
So thinker, persister, harmonizer, imaginer, promoter, and rebel. We all have all six in us.
I was gonna say, yeah. So you mentioned that. So we all have all six within us,
Yeah.
and I think I read on the website as well that they might come maybe in a different order
Yeah.
of preference, or you maybe have
Yeah.
a stronger element of one
Mm-hmm.
versus another. I can, just from the description, I can see what I am, and I do understand like the difference between, say, a thinker and a persister.
Yeah.
I would be probably more of a thinker, less of a persister. I do have beliefs, but I wouldn't necessarily go and actively share them and kind of shout about them. And I would be, yeah, less of a rebel or an imaginer for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. They're all in a particular order. It can be measured, and that order doesn't change after about 7 years old.
Wow.
What can change is how often we can energize the different floors and which floor is our phase or where we're motivated. That can change. And
Okay.
so people can experience pretty dramatic changes in what's important to them, even though the way they present to the world looks the same as when they were 5.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So they get motivated in different ways.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't have kids, but I can imagine that's a huge life change that
Yeah.
happens when you have
Yeah.
kids, and everything changes, or it could be, from a divorce or moving country,
Yeah.
or,
Or
things
COVID.
like that.
We're seeing a
Well,
lot
God,
more
yeah,
people. We're seeing a
COVID.
lot more people kind of have personality crises right now during COVID,
Okay.
because the way in which they used to feed their needs isn't working, or COVID has interfered with their routines for taking care of themselves,
Yeah.
or they're having to deal with some really pretty scary emotional stuff that they didn't have to deal with before.
Yeah.
All of those things can precipitate personality changes.
Wow. And
Yeah.
what can people do, or does it really depend on the personality type, and or is it up to each individual, for example, to understand how to satisfy? I mean, it comes back
Yeah.
to need satisfaction
Yeah.
in relation to motivation, and understanding this is my personality type. This is what's come to light because of this
Yeah.
global pandemic that we're facing. I need to understand how to satisfy my own needs, and therefore what actions to take in order to make sure that those are satisfied. Would that be fair to say, or is there something
Yeah, I think it's
generic that
fair.
people can do?
No, generically, that's important. Specifically, it's different for different people.
Yeah,
And sometimes people have forgotten or lost touch with what really fills their tank,
yeah,
because they've maybe been in a job where they can't do that, or they've just served everyone else and never thought about themselves. So they might need outside help, or need an assessment, or need to read the book like mine to be able to get back in touch with, oh, yes, this is what I need to be healthy.
yes,
Um, in about 45 minutes after we're done here, I'm teaching a workshop on, it's called Personality Tune-Ups, Maintenance and Upgrades for the Road Ahead. And it's really about just what you're talking about, is we have to maintain and upgrade our personalities to be able
yeah.
to keep thriving.
Brilliant. I love it.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we haven't necessarily covered within the book that you think that people should know about?
Oh, maybe 5 or 6 hours of more stuff, but no. No,
To be honest,
I
Nate, I could happily sit here and talk to you for
oh,
another 5 or 6 hours about this
yeah.
stuff, but
I would
in the
say that
limitations of time.
I would say the book is not just for executive leaders with titles of leadership. It's for
Hmm.
anyone that wants to unpack and unlock the potential in their personality, take better care of themselves. If you're struggling during COVID right now, read the book and see what you can learn about yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I mean, I totally get that. Like, to
yeah,
me, people might see that as, oh yeah, that's something for leaders, but actually, no, I think, like, maybe I'm biased because I tend to buy all of those kind of books and read all those kind of books anyway, because I'm so interested in this area.
yeah, yeah,
But I think it's really, really important, especially based on what you're saying, need satisfaction and understanding ourselves. So very important question. What makes you happier at work?
Well, when I meet my needs, when
Mm,
I use my time productively, I am the most satisfied. When I leverage my unique gifts, the strengths that go with my personality to both advance our business, to help other people shine, I feel so satisfied.
yeah,
Tonight, I'm using my base character strengths of adaptable, charming, and persuasive. I'm using those to gather my team on my deck, socially distanced, to be able to see each other in person for the first time in a month and celebrate some things that we've accomplished, but also support each other for some really difficult things we've been through over this last week. And so I'm using my charisma to rally the troops. We're going to have a little fun and a few surprises, but it's leverage. It's using what I'm good at to help our team. And
Yeah.
I feel great at the end of the day. And I'm most joyful when I can do that, or when I can adapt how I communicate to meet each one of my daughters, my 3 daughters' needs. They're so different. When they open up to me because they trust me, um, that gives me a lot of joy.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. And if people want to connect, if they want to buy the book, opportunities to shout out about how
Sure.
to connect with you, where to find the book, and your previous books, of course, as well.
Yeah. We'll make it really easy. Seeingpeoplethrough.com is where you can get the book. You can learn about me. You can connect with other things that I do. My previous book was called Conflict Without Casualties, and it's all about how compassion helps us go into that battlefield of conflict without anybody having to get hurt. And instead, we create something amazing. So seeingpeoplethrough.com, start there, and you can go wherever you want.
Brilliant. I love it. Thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed our conversation, and absolutely I could have spent another 5 or 6 hours talking about this stuff. And I'm really looking forward to diving into your book as well.
You're welcome. It's been a joy.